At 2 a.m., my friend called from a bachelor party. He said, "We got escort girls, you should see this one." Then he whispered, "Wait, isn't that your fiancée? She's walking toward me." The first time I realized something was off about Sienna was the night I didn't expect to hear her voice at all. It was 2 in the morning, the kind of hour when your brain's barely functioning, and the only light in the apartment came from my computer monitor. I was debugging a client's code, trying to finish before sunrise. My phone buzzed once, then again, before I noticed the name flashing on the screen, Cole. Cole doesn't call at 2 a.m. unless someone's dead or drunk. He was at a co-worker's bachelor party downtown, one of those chaotic nights that I usually avoided. The music behind him was so loud I could barely hear his voice when he shouted something about escort girls. I half listened, waiting for the punchline. Then his tone changed. The background noise dropped as if he'd walked into another room. He said quietly that one of the women looked exactly like Sienna. Same hair, same eyes, even the same small scar on her left shoulder. At first, I laughed. Sienna had told me she was spending the weekend at her cousin's place upstate, helping plan a bridal shower. She'd texted photos of wine glasses and table settings earlier that night. I told Cole he'd had too much to drink, but he insisted. Then, a second later, my phone buzzed again. A blurred photo came through. Even though it was dark, I recognized her white silk dress, the gold necklace I'd given her for her birthday, and that small tattoo of a crescent moon she kept hidden behind her collarbone. It didn't feel like jealousy, more like numb confusion. I told him not to say anything, hung up, and sat there for a minute, staring at the photo. My heartbeat was steady, almost mechanical, but my thoughts weren't. I wanted it to be some twisted coincidence, maybe a look-alike, a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew her smile too well. By 3 o'clock, I was on the highway. The hotel Cole had mentioned was only 40 minutes away, one of those sleek downtown towers with valet parking and tinted lobby windows. My hand stayed tight on the wheel the entire drive. I didn't blast music or talk to myself. I just listened to the hum of the tires and the low sound of my pulse. When I pulled into the side lot, I spotted a cluster of limos out front and heard bass echoing through the glass doors. Inside, the lobby was mostly empty except for a few people checking out early and a bored receptionist scrolling through her phone. I walked past the elevators, pretending to text someone, and positioned myself near the hallway leading to the ballroom. That's where I saw her. She wasn't wearing the cardigan she'd left home in, just the same white silk dress from the photo, now a little wrinkled, a little shorter under the bright lights. She sat on a bar stool, laughing at something a man beside her said, someone older, maybe in his 40s, his hand resting casually on her thigh. She leaned in closer, brushed his wrist aside, and whispered something that made him grin wider. Every part of me wanted to storm in, to shout her name, to ask what the hell she was doing there. But the logical part of me, the same one that used to troubleshoot code until sunrise, kept me frozen. She hadn't noticed me. Not yet. The bartender set down a drink in front of her. She reached into her purse, slid a few bills across the counter. Cash. Always cash. She didn't see me when she stood up and took the man's arm, heading toward the elevators. I followed just far enough to see which floor the elevator stopped on. The 4th. I waited 2 minutes, pretending to check my phone, then took the next one up. The hallway was silent except for the faint buzz of the lights overhead. At the far end, I saw the man's jacket hanging on the door handle of room 412. I didn't need to see more. My chest felt hollow, not heavy. There was no cinematic heartbreak, no anger that burst out of control, just a quiet calculation forming in the back of my mind. I pulled my phone out, zoomed in on the door, and recorded for a few seconds. Then I walked back to the elevator, stepped inside, and looked at myself in the mirrored panel. My reflection didn't even look angry. It just looked awake. The drive home felt endless. The horizon was turning gray when I reached our neighborhood, and the first thing I noticed was her car parked in the driveway. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined everything. Maybe she really had been at her cousin's and came back early. But when I stepped inside, the faint smell of perfume hit me. Not her usual floral scent, but something heavier, more artificial, the kind that clings to hotel hallways. The apartment was spotless, like she'd spent extra time erasing evidence. On the kitchen counter, a note. Had the best weekend. You'd have loved the place. Still sleepy, don't wake me. I crumpled it and threw it away. Her shoes were by the door, the same ones from the photo. I noticed a faint scuff on the heel and a small stain on the strap that looked like spilled champagne. The suitcase she'd taken was already unpacked, her clothes neatly folded, the silk dress hanging by the window to air out. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her side, the sheets perfectly smoothed. The digital clock blinked 5:43. She wasn't home yet. She'd left her car here, but gone somewhere else after the hotel. That was the part that didn't make sense, and that's what made me stay awake until the sound of keys in the lock startled me. When the door opened, the morning sun filled the hallway, and Sienna walked in wearing gym clothes, her hair pulled into a ponytail. She smiled like nothing had happened, said she'd gone for a sunrise run near her cousin's house, that she'd just driven straight home. She dropped her bag, kissed my cheek, and asked why I was up so early. I told her I couldn't sleep. That was the truth. She went straight to the shower, humming under her breath. When the water started running, I stood outside the door for a few seconds, listening to her sing softly to herself, completely at ease. She'd rehearsed this version of her life so perfectly that even now, she didn't flinch. I walked to my desk, plugged in my phone, and transferred the short video I'd taken at the hotel. Her dress, the man's jacket, the timestamp in the corner. I saved it twice, one copy on my laptop, another in the cloud. Not because I wanted revenge yet, because I wanted the truth to exist somewhere outside my own disbelief. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, she asked if I wanted breakfast. I nodded. She smiled again, exactly the way she had at the bar. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. Sienna wasn't just lying to me. She was living two completely separate lives, and she was good at it. I watched her move around the kitchen like nothing was wrong, making coffee, humming, talking about her cousin's engagement, describing details she'd invented to fill her story. Every lie was smooth, measured, perfectly placed. She had done this before. By the time I took the first sip of coffee, I already knew this wasn't about infidelity. It was about control. She had built a world where truth only existed when she allowed it to. And that was the first night I stopped believing anything that came out of her mouth. Sienna always knew how to make guilt look beautiful. For the next few days, she walked around our apartment as if nothing had happened, talking about her cousin's engagement, pretending to scroll through photos, laughing at her own stories. Every detail was so carefully constructed that if I hadn't seen her at that hotel, I might have believed her. She even brought home a gift, a sleek silver watch in a velvet box, saying it was from her cousin's fiancé, as a thank you for helping plan the weekend. She said it too casually, like she'd practiced it. I nodded, thanked her, and slid it into my desk drawer. The moment she went to bed, I searched the brand online. It cost nearly $1,000, and the serial number had been removed from the back. Sienna's lies had always been small before, white lies about gym classes or influencer collabs that never really happened. But now there was a rhythm to them. She'd wake early, leave in workout gear, and be gone for hours. Some days, she came home glowing with energy. Other days, distant and distracted, saying she was tired from training clients. Her cousin's Instagram told another story entirely. I checked it late one night, while Sienna slept beside me, and saw a post from a sunny beach in Mexico, dated the same weekend Sienna was supposedly there. In every photo, her cousin was surrounded by family. No Sienna, no mention of her name anywhere. That was the first piece of proof that made it real. The second came 2 days later. Sienna's gym bag was sitting by the front door. She'd gone to teach a private session, but forgot her towel. I bent down to move it and noticed the zipper was slightly open. Inside was an envelope with cash, neat stacks of hundreds held together with rubber bands. No receipts, no notes, just money. Next to it, a small burner phone, one of those prepaid ones you buy at gas stations. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. The messages weren't encrypted or hidden. The first text at the top read, Friday night 9 p.m., same place, same rate. Bring the white dress. The name above it was CH, short for something, maybe initials. There were other texts too. New client confirmed. Cash only, no transfers. Keep receipts out of sight. My stomach tightened as I scrolled. The phone had 2 apps, a private calendar and an encrypted photo gallery. I didn't open the photos. I didn't need to. I took pictures of the screen with my own phone, careful not to leave fingerprints on the burner. Then I zipped everything back exactly how it was and returned it to her bag. That night she came home with takeout and kissed my cheek like she hadn't just spent the afternoon selling something sacred. She joked about me, working too much, and told me I looked pale. I said I was fine. The next day, I started my own quiet investigation. Cole and I met for lunch downtown. I told him everything, the cash, the phone, the messages. He looked sick halfway through the story. When I showed him the screenshots, his hand trembled slightly. He'd been at that bachelor party. He'd seen her. There was no denying it now. He leaned forward and asked what I wanted to do. Confront her? Expose her? Walk away? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I asked him to do one thing. Help me find out who CH was. Cole worked in finance, the kind of guy who knew how to trace names through payment systems and receipts. A few days later, he called me back, whispering like we were planning a heist. CH, he said, is Dr. Callum Hayes, former hospital director, fired last year for budget misconduct. Guess what else? He runs a so-called wellness consultancy now. and the LLC is under his initials, CH Therapy and Coaching. It didn't make sense at first. Sienna had worked at the hospital before she quit to focus on fitness. Callum had been her supervisor. She'd mentioned him once or twice, always calling him a decent mentor. I'd never thought much of it. The realization hit like a slow, sinking weight. The escort work wasn't just side money. It was an operation. He was running it, using his coaching business as a cover, and Sienna was one of his recruits. I decided to test her story before confronting her. That weekend, she told me she was traveling again, another wellness seminar out of town. I nodded, wished her luck, and said I had a business meeting of my own. When she left, I followed. She took her car to a luxury hotel on the east side, the kind that catered to high-end clients who wanted discretion. I parked 2 blocks away and watched her walk through the revolving doors in a beige coat. 10 minutes later, I entered the lobby under the pretense of finding a lost wallet. I asked the front desk if a Sienna Brooks had been seen. The receptionist hesitated, then said, "Oh yes, she was here earlier. Booked under her own name, paid in cash." She smiled politely. "Would you like me to check if she's still around?" I said no. That was all I needed. When I got home that night, the apartment felt colder, emptier. I went through the motions, brushed my teeth, checked emails, stared at my computer screen without reading anything. At 11, she texted saying she'd be home late. She came in after midnight, smelling faintly of perfume and hotel soap. She kissed me goodnight, whispering about how productive her trip had been. I lay awake beside her, watching the moonlight trace the shape of her face. For a moment, I remembered the woman I'd proposed to. The one who used to cry at movies, who laughed until she snorted. That person didn't exist anymore. The next morning, I made coffee early and told her I had errands. When she left for her client session, I turned on her old tablet, the one she barely used. She'd logged into her cloud account months ago and never signed out. The files synced automatically. Inside was a folder named fitness_clients. I opened it expecting invoices, maybe diet plans. Instead, I found a spreadsheet labeled Schedule, Private Bookings. Columns of dates, initials, and rates. At the top, a note. Update Dr. H. New clients. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled through the entries. She'd been doing this for at least 8 months. Names, hotel codes, room numbers. Everything meticulously recorded. It wasn't impulsive, it was a system. I copied the files onto a flash drive, locked it in my drawer, and sat down. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal itself or how calmly she'd built it into her life. That evening, she brought home groceries and joked about us needing a date night. I agreed. I even smiled. I had to, because now I knew that rage wasn't the weapon I needed, precision was. Later that night, when she fell asleep, I called Cole again. I told him I wanted to end it on my own terms. He asked what that meant. I said I wanted to book her next session. We spent the next few hours crafting a plan. Cole borrowed a friend's number, created a new client profile through the same contact app I'd seen on her burner. I knew the language they used, the right codes, the phrasing, the format. Within an hour, the request was sent. Friday, 8:30 p.m., it said. Private appointment. No distractions. Double rate. She replied 15 minutes later with one word, confirmed. I stared at that message for a long time. Not out of heartbreak, not even disbelief, just a cold awareness that I was about to meet the woman I loved, not as her fiancée, but as her client. The kind of meeting where everything would finally come to light. Friday came faster than I wanted it to. The entire week passed in a blur of pretending to work, to eat, to sleep, to care. Sienna was cheerful that morning, humming in the kitchen, talking about her client consultation later that evening. She didn't notice I barely responded. Her confidence had grown into something eerie. She'd stopped even trying to hide the inconsistencies. She thought she had me perfectly fooled. At 6 o'clock, she started getting ready. I watched from the hallway, quiet, unnoticed, as she slipped into the white silk dress, the same one from the hotel. She adjusted her necklace in the mirror, the same necklace I'd bought her, and smiled faintly at her reflection. Then she grabbed her gym bag and keys and left. Cole was waiting in his car a few blocks down. We'd already rented the apartment under a fake name, neutral, furnished, nothing personal inside. The building was managed by a property company that handled corporate stays, and they didn't ask questions. Everything about it looked normal from the outside, and that was the point. We parked nearby, engine off, waiting. The air was heavy with that strange mix of adrenaline and dread. My hands itched to call her, to stop this before it started, but there was no turning back. At 8:15, Sienna's car pulled into the lot. She checked her makeup in the mirror, fixed her hair, and texted the client, which, of course, was me. My phone buzzed. Here. I waited until she entered the building before I followed, keeping a few steps behind. Cole stayed near the exit in case anything went wrong. The hallway was quiet except for the distant hum of air conditioning. I stopped outside the door, took a slow breath, and unlocked it with the spare key. When she opened the door, she froze. For a split second, neither of us spoke. Her eyes darted around the room like she couldn't process what she was seeing. Her lips parted slightly, as if she might scream, but she didn't. Then a sound came from behind her, shuffling, a cough. Another man stepped into view, buttoning his shirt in a panic. I recognized him immediately. Dr. Callum Hayes. It was like watching two worlds collapse into one frame. Sienna's face drained of color. Callum froze, holding his jacket like a shield. I could almost see the calculations happening behind her eyes, the desperate scramble to invent a story that could explain everything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move closer. I just looked at her and said her name. She stammered something about misunderstanding, about helping a friend. Callum tried to step forward, saying this was strictly professional. But the words sounded ridiculous in that room that reeked of perfume and cheap champagne. I turned toward him, not with anger, but with focus. "You're running it," I said quietly. "The whole operation." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was enough. I took out my phone and snapped a photo. Sienna standing half-dressed beside her boss, both caught in the light of a single lamp. Callum started to protest, but I walked past him and picked up a folder from the table. Inside were handwritten notes, cash envelopes, and a ledger that looked disturbingly familiar. The same structure as the spreadsheet I'd found on her tablet. I slipped the folder under my arm, turned toward the door, and left. Sienna didn't follow. She just stood there, frozen, like the moment had drained every lie she'd ever built. Cole was outside waiting by the car. When he saw me, he didn't ask what happened. He just started the engine. I rolled down the window, took one last look at the building, and said, "We're done." But it wasn't over. That night, I didn't confront her when she came home. She arrived after midnight, pretending to yawn, pretending everything was normal. I didn't even speak. I just let her crawl into bed beside me, her breathing steady, her lies heavy in the air. The next morning, I called the hospital's compliance office from a payphone near my office. I gave no name, no number, just sent them an email with the photos, screenshots, and the spreadsheet. Within hours, the message was forwarded to the board and copied to the local authorities. By noon, I saw the first sign it was working. Sienna's phone started buzzing nonstop. First one call, then another, then 10 more. She answered one and went pale. The color drained from her face completely. She said she had to go handle something urgent and rushed out without even grabbing her purse. I followed at a distance. She drove straight to the hospital, parked illegally, and ran inside. 20 minutes later, she came out with her hair disheveled, eyes red. She looked around the parking lot like she expected someone to appear. That evening, she sat on the couch staring at nothing. When I walked past her, she whispered something I couldn't make out. The next day, a letter arrived from the hospital, marked confidential. I didn't open it, she did. I heard the paper tear, then the sound of her breath catching. They'd suspended her pending investigation. She tried to act confused, claimed it was a mistake, that someone was spreading rumors. But the cracks were spreading too fast for her to seal them. Callum had been called in for questioning as well. The hospital was beginning to connect dots I'd already drawn. For the next week, she barely left the apartment. She stopped eating, stopped posting on social media, stopped going to the gym. Her phone kept lighting up with messages from Callum, all ignored. Then one evening, I heard her crying in the bathroom. Not the soft kind of crying that asks for comfort. This was the sharp, uneven sound of someone realizing they'd run out of exits. She came out eventually, eyes red, and asked if I knew anything about what was happening. I met her gaze and said calmly that I didn't. She searched my face, hoping for some sign of emotion, some thread she could pull to get back control. But there was nothing left for her to hold on to. That night, she slept on the couch. The distance between us wasn't physical anymore. It was permanent. The next morning, Cole texted me a single line. "It's public now." I opened my laptop and searched for Callum's name. The local paper had just published a brief article. Hospital director under investigation for misuse of resources. The article mentioned unauthorized activities involving hospital property and staff. No names yet, but I knew hers would surface soon enough. When she saw it, she went completely silent. No screaming, no denial, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when a person realizes they're about to lose everything they built out of deception. That evening, I packed my things. I didn't announce it, didn't make a scene. I just folded my clothes, took my laptop, my files, and the silver watch she'd gifted me, the one she probably bought with her earnings, and left it on the table. She didn't stop me. She didn't ask me to stay. She just sat there, staring at the article, holding her phone like she was waiting for it to ring. When I closed the door behind me, I felt no relief, just the strange calm of inevitability. By the weekend, the story had spread. 2 arrests had been made related to illicit business operations linked to the hospital. Sienna's name was finally mentioned, buried halfway through the article. She'd been charged with professional misconduct and removed from her position. Cole and I met for coffee the next day. He asked if I wanted to tell her it was me who sent the report. I said no. The truth was punishment enough. I looked out the cafe window as the rain started to fall, the city lights blurring behind it, and realized I'd stopped wondering why she'd done it. Some people don't have reasons. They just test how far the world will let them lie. By the time winter came, Sienna's name was everywhere, not splashed across headlines, but buried inside them. The kind of notoriety that clings quietly, one you can't shake even when people stop saying it out loud. She lost her job first, then her apartment, then her following. Her sponsors pulled out within days of the story breaking. Every fitness brand that had once begged for her partnership issued vague statements about reassessing collaborations. The scandal grew larger than anyone had expected. The local paper ran an expose a week later. Escort ring operated through hospital's wellness program. 2 staff arrested, for under review. The photo showed Callum being escorted into a courthouse, handcuffed but smiling faintly, like he thought he'd talk his way out of it. He didn't. The authorities discovered offshore accounts, falsified invoices, and cash laundering through supposed consulting sessions. Sienna wasn't named in the charges at first, but the receipts tied her to at least a dozen clients. I didn't follow every article. I only read enough to know she hadn't gone to prison. She'd taken a plea deal, cooperation for leniency. In exchange, she testified against Callum, describing how he'd convinced her to start taking private clients after her shift at the hospital. Whether that was true or not, no one could prove otherwise. Her record was permanently tarnished, her nursing license revoked. For a while, she tried to rebuild her online image. She posted about taking accountability, about healing, and toxic leadership. It didn't work. The internet forgets slowly when money and sex are involved. The comments under her posts filled with venom, screenshots, and disbelief. Sponsors ghosted her, friends blocked her. Eventually, she stopped posting altogether. But this wasn't just her ruin. It was mine too, in a quieter way. After I moved out, I stayed with Cole for a few months. He lived in a small 2-bedroom near the water, the kind of place that always smelled faintly of coffee and salt. The first nights were strange, waking up expecting to hear her voice, reaching for my phone out of habit, deleting old messages without reading them. Cole didn't pry, though I knew he wanted to. One evening, he slid a beer across the table and said, "You could have just walked away. Why go this far?" I didn't answer right away. I wasn't proud of what I'd done, not exactly. But I told him this, that I couldn't stand the idea of her continuing untouched, manipulating people who didn't see it coming. She'd been so calm when she lied, so methodical, that walking away felt like letting her rewrite the story entirely. So I made sure the truth stayed permanent. For months, life settled into silence. I worked from home, rarely checked social media, and stopped talking about her altogether. But she didn't disappear completely. A few times, she texted from new numbers, messages that alternated between apologies and pleas. "Please talk to me. You don't understand what he did. I can fix it." I never replied. Eventually, the messages stopped. Then one morning, Cole sent me a link. A short local news segment. The anchor mentioned her name again, this time in connection to the final sentencing. Callum had been convicted on multiple counts of fraud and coercion, sentenced to 5 years. 14 others were charged. The report said an anonymous tip had triggered the investigation. I sat back, watching the screen flicker. They never knew it was me. For a brief moment, I wondered if she ever suspected. Maybe she did. Maybe that's why she stopped reaching out, because she finally realized I'd seen the whole thing unfold and hadn't said a word. A few weeks later, I ran into her by accident. It was early evening, downtown, near a cafe I'd started visiting after work. I was sitting outside, watching the rain slide down the awning, when she crossed the street. She didn't see me at first. Her hair was shorter, darker, almost unrecognizable from the woman I'd once known. But when she turned toward the window, our eyes met. For a second, time stalled. She froze, her breath catching just visibly. Then she walked inside. I thought she'd turn away, but she didn't. She came straight to my table, every step slow, deliberate. She didn't look angry, just hollow. She sat down without asking. She said she knew it was me, that she'd pieced it together after the suspension notice, that no one else had reason to send those files. I didn't confirm or deny it. She asked if I'd done it to hurt her or to save myself. I told her neither. I said the truth had to exist somewhere, even if it destroyed both of us. She looked down at her hands. The tattoos on her wrist had been removed, faint scars where the ink used to be. She said she'd tried to rebuild, A new city, a new name, but every time she filled out a job application, her past came up. Employers Googled. Clients recognized her. She said she didn't blame me, but would never forgive me either. I told her forgiveness wasn't what I was looking for. We sat there for a while in silence, the rain filling the spaces between words. When she finally stood to leave, she said quietly that she sometimes missed who she used to be before all of it. Then she looked at me and added, "But I think that person never really existed." I watched her walk away until she disappeared into the crowd. That was the last time I saw her. Months passed, then a year. Life moved forward in fragments. I moved into a small apartment across town, started taking more freelance work, even joined Cole at the gym occasionally. There were nights I still thought about the version of life we almost had. The house, the wedding, the ordinary peace I used to believe was guaranteed. But something had changed permanently. Trust didn't come easily anymore. I caught myself analyzing everyone's tone, cross-referencing small details, looking for patterns that weren't there. It wasn't paranoia, just the residue of betrayal. Then one morning, while grabbing coffee before work, I overheard two people at the counter talking about the scandal. The woman mentioned Sienna's name, then paused, struggling to recall the details. She was the nurse, right? Got caught up in that escort thing. Her friend shrugged. Oh yeah, wild story. Wonder whatever happened to her. And just like that, she was gone. Reduced to a rumor, a cautionary tale, a name people forgot as quickly as they remembered. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, and realized that was the real ending. Not the confrontation, not the exposure, not even the punishment, but the forgetting. The quiet fade from relevance that follows when everyone else moves on. A few weeks later, Cole and I met for dinner at a small diner by the water. He told me he was getting married, to someone he'd met months before all this started. I congratulated him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. He raised his glass and said, "You know, you could have just blocked her." I smiled. Yeah, but then she'd still be out there, untouched. Some people need consequences, not closure. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in months, I laughed, not the bitter kind that follows pain, but a real one, light and unforced. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city looked clean again, like it had washed away every trace of what happened. I knew life wouldn't go back to what it was, but maybe that was the point. I left the diner feeling something I hadn't felt since that first 2 a.m. call. Clarity. Not revenge, not relief, just a quiet certainty that some endings don't need to be rewritten. They just need to end.